let's go to our next speaker. So we're going to listen to Matt Crouch. I'm going to make Matt our presenter. So as we're getting Matt set up, we will do an introduction of Matt. I think he's just about ready to go. So the next session we're going to listen to is called Overcoming Operational Challenges in Producing Specialty Beverages. Speaking on this subject, we have Matt Couch, founder and lead consultant at Solon Consulting. Matt Couch is a beverage industry veteran with experience at every level, from startup to multinational. He is an international consultant and now owner-operator of Old Greg Brewing Company, along with Solon Consulting. So Matt, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for giving us a few extra minutes with the previous session. And we will turn the session over to you now.
All right. Thanks so much, David. Really appreciate the intro. And I just want to say hi to everybody. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate your time. This presentation covers a very broad swath. So Judy's speaking engagement there was actually really a portion of kind of what we'll cover, which, the coffee industry is directly tied into a lot of what we're going to talk about and has a ton of similarities. And what I'm going to talk about is a little bit more about the granular detail of the operations. If you're planning to get into the industry of specialty beverages, which covers a huge catalog of types of beverages, these are the kind of considerations you need to have getting into the industry. Now, those of you that are part of this presentation audience that are already in the specialty beverage industry, hopefully you can glean out some interesting things to think about that maybe you didn't address in your operations. And that's really what we as a company do at Solon. Is we work with clients, which we treat as partners in their business, to develop their operations, improve efficiencies, really focus on getting a higher margin out of your product with better market impact. And that's 100% our goal, because that's a successful specialty beverage company. It checks all those boxes. So before we really get into the granular detail, so this is the presentation that we're going to be talking about operational challenges. A little bit about me. So I come from a very odd background. I'm a little bit of a polymath in a lot of ways. And as David pointed out, I'm also a little bit on the crazy side in that I like to do a lot of things all at the same time. So we're currently running a very successful brewery and bar combination concept here in the north of Austin, Texas. So we're just outside the city limits by about a mile or two in more of a suburb area. It's basically the blending of concepts of being an outdoor bar, also being a brewery as well. And we'll talk about why that strategy is something relatively new, but at least in the US, and something to kind of think about if you want to get into the retail manufacturing subset, right? But a little bit about me. I actually grew up in central Pennsylvania, very much the middle of nowhere. My family are dairy farmers, or were dairy farmers. They just got out of the industry here a few years ago. And I grew up working on the farm. At one point, I decided to go to school for classical and ancient Mediterranean studies. And that was a nice little tangent of life that I am not applying at all anymore, besides some logic and reasoning side. So from there, I actually decided to go get formal training in brewing. So I jetted off to England in my early 20s, just legal drinking age, basically. Fell in love with the concept of making beer, and really discovered how much of an international company or international industry brewing is. It is all encompassing. It covers so many concepts, so many scientific topics and categories, that it really immerses you in a broad spectrum of skill sets. And you need to know everything to be a good brewer. And you're always learning. There is nobody in this entire world that can say they know everything about brewing. It doesn't exist. It's always changing on you. But part of that experience was working with companies, or working for companies, that really did a multitude of different beverage types and got a lot of exposure to a lot of non-alcoholic offerings, of how to actually manufacture effectively all sorts of different beverage types. And I did that for long enough, managing multiple facilities at a few times at some pretty large regional breweries, uh, to where we saw the industry change about a decade ago. So the brewing industry started to go through a transition 10 years ago where a lot of the uh, big growth movers and shakers, so the more big regional craft brewing guys, started to see a little bit of a slip in growth. And it was at the time relatively marginal, but it was a dramatic change to the double digit growth they were experiencing every year. So the company I was part of decided that they were going to sell the business to an equity firm. And through that transition, not that I was unhappy at all about the sale, but from a very cold and logical perspective, it didn't make sense for me to stay when I had no equity in that company. There wasn't really a direct benefit to me. So at the time, I decided to step back, go to the much more smaller, impactful business type that was actually starting to see immense growth and maintain that growth, which was the brew pub. The brew pub is, strictly speaking, a manufacturing company that exists in the retail space. So you manufacture beverages to be served directly over the counter. You cut out a ton of costs that way, no packaging necessarily, unless that's something you want to get into. So we were seeing much better margins and basically a much more functional business at the time that demonstrated a lot more health because we were cutting out so many immense costs that come with distribution and marketing and sales and all of that. Then COVID hit. So the world changed on everybody again in a very short period of time. So everybody in that space had to adapt. And we basically went through becoming much more focused into packaged product because we had to. You didn't have people in your space anymore. From that era, I decided that maybe it was a good time to start consulting as well. So I'm still a part owner of that original brewery, our brew pub here in Austin. We just started another brew pub here in Austin as well with some different partners. And the consulting has grown into doing everything from RTDs. We're doing nutritional beverages. We're doing non-traditional nutritional beverages as well, some alcoholic, non-alcoholic. We're consulting for a broad swath of clients, distilleries, grain millers. I mean, you name it, we probably have done it. Oddly enough, Judy had mentioned oranges. We actually have one of our clients who developed a orange import business from Greece to the United States, seeing the advantages of such a thing, which is still ongoing, and we help out with wherever we can. So we're a bit of an odd bird in that we don't shy away from any challenge. If there's a challenge, we want to help solve it. So that's a little bit about me. What we're going to cover in the presentation is more focusing on the specialty beverage industry. And I'll start with a market overview just to kind of lay the groundwork of what we're talking about. But the actual topics we're going to cover are some of the very key impact topics, right? The things that really impact your business. And anymore, these are kind of the things that we discuss with clients over and over again who are starting or existing in the space. And a lot of these have a huge impact on the success of these businesses. So kind of going through this, I'll touch on them one by one as we go through. And basically what I would like to address first is the market context, right? So the landscape that we're moving into here with the specialty beverage space. And to understand what's happening, it's never static. The specialty beverage space is always changing. You have niches that grow very quickly and exponentially even, and they kind of reach their saturation point and they slow down in their growth and a new niche comes out. And a lot of the things that Judy touched on are impacting our industries as well. And that is 100% changes in the drinkers' habits. And the last few years have been relatively quick changes. They're not unprecedented. I mean, there's a lot of historical context and a lot of historical repetition for a lot of what's happening now. And looking back at those times of those industries helps give you a lot of insight into kind of where we're headed next. So That being said, these are considerations you need to have going into it if you're looking at starting a business or changing the direction or adding on a specialty beverage into your business, is understanding that landscape, what you're going to be dealing with as far as the market and what sort of shifts happen and how adaptable you need to be. And these things, for the variables, let's say, that aren't necessarily in your control, demand. You can push that a little bit, basically, from your positioning, from your marketing, from your sales team, for sure. But inevitably, you have to be adaptive on that. And sometimes fads arise that you need to be much more passive about, but take that opportunity to utilize or sort of go with that flow whenever those things happen. Competition and pricing. I mean, it's a big deal now as well. Pricing, especially, there's been an extremely lot of noise in a lot of industries about the increase in raw materials. And the really successful businesses lately have been finding new avenues and new sources that get around these price increases or mitigate them, which requires being creative. You have to know certain people in certain places to be able to get things at a very good cost and a reasonable cost. Packaging trends, aluminum cans is probably one of the most volatile products out there as far as a packaging product. And there's been a major shift in behavior where people prefer aluminum cans over bottles now. That is definitely for the utility, for their ease, for their convenience, right? But that being said, cans have fluctuated so much on price. There have been a lot of movers who have tried to get into can production that have failed in recent times due to just overall shifts in the supply of aluminum, where it's coming from, what it costs, the overall demand, basically the change in the markets, what they don't adapt to. So packaging trends can really impact your business if you're not ready to evolve quickly. And just opportunities. There's always a rise and a fall and kind of a new creation of opportunity potential out there. Basically, the opportunities are not necessarily novel. They're always existing, but it's relying on the creation of those opportunities and capitalizing on that initiation to be able to get in there quickly. And one thing I will say that I think is a focus of a lot of businesses in general is that a lot of people think they have to be the first. They do not, right? You can just kind of wait out an industry to develop before you capitalize on it. And actually, guys, I might stop. One of our dogs escaped its holding cell. So if you don't mind, David, can you confirm, are you hearing dog barks in the background?
Just a bit, yeah.
Okay, all right. I don't want it to be a major interruption. So if it's a big disruption, let me know and I'll wrangle them again.
It's okay now. I don't hear as much now.
Okay. They have a tendency of escaping any sort of containment field I try to put them in. So again, market snapshot, what we're looking at right now, some of the keys that are happening in the market is healthy beverages. Judy touched on this. Basically, we're seeing a shift to where people want nutritional beverages. They want more health conscious beverages. It's growth in convenience, I think, is a big portion of this. And this is a really big driver in any business, really. But the low, no sugar, natural ingredients, and functional benefits is a huge driver these days. And that also is allowing for premiumization, right? And what I say by premiumization is basically people look at these products as being of higher value and are willing to pay more for those beverages, right? Or those products. That is happening in a lot of ways, and we'll touch on it to some current industries that have actually gone through a premiumization that used to not have that availability. But that's a huge deal, is basically your consumer's perspective of what you're producing. And just convenience, right? I mean, this is something that's driven most especially RTDs. And when I say RTDs, that's ready to drink cocktail beverages. So basically, if you think about what if you could possibly contain a bar produced cocktail in a can to be grab and go, that is what's happening. And it's a big growing industry. It seems to have started to not peak, but start to slow down a little bit in its growth. but that may not be a demand issue. That may be another different issue that we'll touch on. So looking at this, this is kind of the new landscape of what specialty beverages are doing. There are definitely, I'm assuming, probably going to be some questions about things like seltzers. The industry too of whiskey, American whiskey especially, is going through some massive changes right now, and not all of them looking good. There's a lot of shifts happening in general. So I'll touch on that as we kind of go through the challenges and talk about some of the solutions. But keep in mind, these are the biggest movers at the moment. And we've seen a ton of new clients come into our portfolio that are looking most especially at nutritional beverages and variations of either alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverage that is considered or can be advertised as being healthier. Alcoholic beverages are an extreme struggle, and you're not going to get much leeway in the United States, at least, being able to call anything with alcohol in it healthy. That's just something that you cannot do from a regulation standpoint. So there's ways of going around that in a sense of just describing what it has in it, but keep that in mind that really health benefit beverages usually do not include alcoholic beverages whatsoever. So let's dive into the challenges and the solutions. And really, the one thing to keep in mind when we're talking about this is our focus here is more about the operations side, right? And beverage manufacturing is food production. It is something that everyone needs to get their heads wrapped around, that means whatever facility you are making these beverages in must be up to standards of food production. So all those considerations for cleanliness, pest control, design, dust, just general health regulations need to be factored in. And that is a very important distinction here, that even whiskey and beer that are considered inherently safe need to have what we call a very rigorous HACCP plan in place, which is hazardous analysis and critical control points, which is basically looking at any potential point in your process that could allow for something to get into that beverage that could cause harm to your consumer. So keeping that in mind, when you think about getting into these industries, that means it's very specialized, but it's also very regulated pretty much wherever you go. And some of our international clients have varying degrees of regulation. That definitely changes from even locality. It's not that much different in the US. There's definitely some local municipalities that will be much more rigorous in their examination and control. Generally from the federal level, they're pretty well structured out. So you can go and see what those regulations are and follow them kind of step by step. So first one we will talk about. This has been pretty much a key issue for so many manufacturers. And as you know, I kind of pointed out from where we are in Austin, Texas, this is a massive growing commercial real estate area as well as residential. We've seen immense growth consistently for decades now. And the one thing that has not changed is the increasing cost of real estate. Most importantly, commercial now. Commercial real estate has seen an immense rise in most especially lease costs. I mean, property costs are also very high here. But what that means is a lot of the businesses that were started 10 years ago that are manufacturing beverage, especially in this area, have just undergone renegotiating their lease. And what's happened is the landlords have basically doubled rents in a lot of cases, which really undercuts your profitability as a business, especially when you spent 10 years just kind of sitting on a nice profit margin. So there's been a lot of closures. And I think one thing to address in the craft brewing world, especially, is that when you see a lot of craft brewing closures, much of that has been driven by real estate costs, believe it or not. That is a huge factor in closure right now. So what do you do? Like, how do you be proactive about managing your real estate costs? And it really is, whether leasing or owning the actual real estate, the dynamics change slightly, but the principles stay the same. And that is making sure you're tracking what is driving these cost increases, be aware of it. For those in a lease situation, always be proactive about engaging your landlord, being in communication with them. Obviously, we talk to ours regularly, uh, just to kind of feel out what's happening, what we're seeing, what they're thinking about. And we just have a brand new lease at our new facility. So honestly, we're not thinking too much about the future, but we're keeping an eye on what's happening around us, right? And that tells you a lot whenever you're looking at your business rent that, hey, if my rent is high now, in 10 years, it's going to be much higher. That's pretty much can rely on that fact. So it's not a bad time to always engage whoever is in control of your real estate. Even if it's yourself, look at the value you're getting out of your own real estate by having your business there. And what is the long-term implications of having that business there? Most of the time, beverage manufacturing is so niche that if you're thinking about your long-term value of your own real estate, you are looking at, if you want to move on from the industry or sell, you pretty much have now a niche set of customers to look at that space as well. It's really hard to deconstruct a beverage manufacturing facility because it has very specialized equipment to do it. So all considerations to have, be proactive on this side of things and make sure you're really creating value out of your spaces for yourself, especially to address these rising costs in real estate. Utilization of space. I mean, this is a huge deal that even if you're owning your own space, are you actually utilizing that real estate to the best of its ability to get the most profitability out of it? And it's one thing to look at lease spaces to say, okay, I need to optimize every square foot, so I'm going to slam everything into a very tiny space. Is that really effective for operations? Does that allow for more production, or does it actually hinder more production based on that square footage? You need to be efficient with your space, not just cram everything into a tiny space. That's not a good utilization of that space necessarily if it doesn't bring more productivity to that space. And if all of these things are lining up and you don't feel good about any of the solutions, might be time to make a move. Most especially, we like to tell this to our manufacturing clients that, why are you trying to open up a manufacturing space in the middle of a city? You're only going to meet challenges at that point. It may be a better move to mitigate your costs to move just outside the city at the intersection of some major highways. As a manufacturer, that opens up your logistics to be way more effective than it does being in this middle of a very urban area. And there's so many challenges that you have to think about because of your placement, incoming raw materials, giant 54-foot trailers bringing raw materials to you in a downtown setting is going to be massively challenging, right? If you're a manufacturer, get out of that urban space. It doesn't do you any benefit. As a retailer, much different approach. You have to be where there's foot traffic. You have to have a very present and a very impactful space. There is a appeal to some of these, what we call them, destination facilities, where you build a beautiful space outside of the city, and that draws people to you because they want to get away and experience the experience you designed. But they have their ceiling. You're probably going to get much more out of a urban set retail space, right? Especially if it's accessible, and especially if it's an alcoholic facility of some kind in the retail space. You need to be where foot traffic is to mitigate the driving aspect. Oddly enough, though, I will say in Texas, one trend we've seen very prevalent is that everyone drives and it doesn't matter. It's basically the way you have to get around. So be conscious of your region and what people prefer, right? And that's, again, looking at your space and your business model should dictate what location you are going to drive that business model in, right? So that is important to be aware of and conscious of. And so this sort of the pressure points of real estate get to be much more granular whenever you look at the utilization of that space and the considerations that you need to have. And one thing we didn't even address here, which is in that production area where you are producing these specialty beverages, you need to think about utilities. basically how much water do you need and how often? And do you have the filtration potential? Do you have the even size of lines coming from the municipality to your space to be able to supply you with enough water? What's that water quality? What is it going to be like once it gets there? Electrical, natural gas, right? I mean, the sewer, which is no one when they're building a facility wants to think about their waste, but that is huge whenever you're considering what space you're going to move to. And we have a lot of instances in the beverage world where somebody will build a really nice metal building out in the country and then realize that they're not on a utility sewer, they're not on a city sewer. So all of a sudden, they have to find a way of getting rid of their wastewater. Well, obviously, you're regulated to the point where you cannot just go out and dump it in the back of your facility. That is going to get you shut down real quick. So you have to actually spend more money getting somebody who is specialized to come pick up your wastewater from a massive collection facility, haul that out, and take care of it for you. That's an added cost that you have to pay that's going to cut into your profit margin. So there are very creative solutions to this. There's some new wastewater filtration facilities that come along, methane digesters. All of those are sunken costs. They're things that are going to basically just cost you money over an expanded amount of time, especially if you finance them, which money is not cheap now. So these considerations go into real estate selection. Now, if you're already locked into some real estate that you own and you're going to build it there, this just becomes considerations for how much you're going to invest in that business to get it started, right? And that affects whether it's a viable approach or not. Warehousing and storage too. I mean, as you grow, a site may no longer be viable because you outgrow it. You may have product waiting in dry storage, or you need to expand your cold storage to just fit how much product you are now producing, right? Cold storage is not cheap by any means. And the more you add, the more utilities you use, it's a constant expense. And you have to have cold storage for beer beverages for sure. For any sort of nutritional beverage or unstable beverage that has a lower shelf life, absolutely so. So these are things to consider, and there's always creative options here. You can do offsite storage for cold storage. Alcohol gets a little trickier because it's so heavily regulated, but as far as that goes, you can find creative solutions, especially for nutritional beverages, where you can have cold storage facilities that you rely on. That comes with a square footage cost because they will charge you per pallet of stored product. They always will get something out of it for sure for storage there. But at least you could also move the cold storage off site. You can do so for alcoholic beverages too. You just need to carry a secondary bond for that place that they're going. So sometimes it's okay to truck beverages back and forth. But again, there's always cost added to these sort of approaches. Retail component, right, has way different demands than a manufacturing component. So if you're putting out a storefront to your manufacturing facility, that build is going to have way different restrictions and requirements, especially if you're having customers come in and spend time there. It changes the entire dynamic of the build. And then office and administrative. You need to do good record keeping. You need to have labs for quality assurance. I mean, these are just things that should be done to really make sure you're controlling your liabilities, right? Because those can be immensely costly as well. So building out some minimal office spaces, most of our approach when we start businesses is the office is the smallest part of the entire building. We don't want people hanging out in there. We don't want them sitting in a very nice, comfy space and not being productive. And also, it helps us with our retail component to have our employees be engaged with the consumer and to really be out and moving. The production side of this, you have to be adaptable. The office becomes sort of your QA lab, and you can keep it very minimal and just hit those very key analytics that you need to make sure quality is consistent. But again, a consideration you have to have is, where am I storing records? Where am I tracking batches? Where am I planning my next moves from? That is the office's place. And a big one is zoning and permitting. So especially in the US, you need to be very aware of any location's zoning and the permits that you can actually apply to that. We're talking about manufacturing and retail, and a lot of places, those two don't really mix. And in fact, there is a separation, and a very clear separation of those things in the state of Texas, for example, where you cannot own manufacturing and retail at the same time. The brew pub license that we have and the bar license is considered 100% retail. They do not even consider it manufacturing. So that keeps our separation clear. Anywhere else, though, this affects what zoning is on that property. And we really like to target unrestricted for sure, because that gives us the absolute most benefit for what we can build and do with that space. Now, so that really covers the real estate considerations. Obviously, if there's any questions, we'll hit those at the end. But we're going to move now into reducing operating costs. And this is absolutely essential because you can think of manufacturing beverages as a cost of goods equation, but most importantly, you need to factor in what it costs you to make that through the utilities, through your efficiencies in the product, the quality considerations. All of that is huge, right? And because it's manufacturing, you need a lot of equipment, you need a lot of utilities, right? So, and it has to be considered into what it costs to produce that good, inevitably, to get to the consumer. So think about beyond the real estate side, if you're looking at rent or upkeep or whatever as part of your property costs, that on top of this, now we are, what does it cost for me to make this without the raw materials necessarily being the driving factor? And you need to constantly improve on these operating costs. There's, as you scale, right, there is usually some savings per package unit that just comes from that scaling up. You're spending a little bit less, you're getting more efficient equipment, more efficient processes, maybe scaling down your labor due to some automation. All of these things come into consideration, but when you're starting, you still have to have this in mind to start from a really good footing. And if you start from really good footing, you're going to be cutting costs much quicker than most of your competitors, which is a huge deal. So purchasing or upgrading equipment is huge to reduce labor costs, especially in the US. It is important to minimize your labor costs because these are specialists that usually work in these industries. And there used to be that manufacturing employees wouldn't really expect much in the way of a salary. That has dramatically changed in the last 10 years, where salaries have increased very highly due to the demand for specialized labor in manufacturing. Efficiency of space, right? And kind of what I had said before, which is don't try to cram everything into a tiny space. That will hinder your productivity, not help it, but utilize it so that every square foot has a value add to it. Everything is dedicated for a purpose. You don't have wasted space unless it's for room to grow, and that actually has a purpose as well, right? So be efficient with your utilization of space. Energy management, again, this is a huge one where you may be using to get started certain things that are very high in their consumption of utilities. As you go along, you need to start reeling that back in, providing improvements and providing efficiencies, because if you can cut your utilities, that will inevitably help you get a better margin off of your product. That being said, utilities can really be volatile in their costs. There's definitely some issues here of rising carbon dioxide costs, right? For if you're doing carbonated beverages, depending on where you are too, that can have a dramatic impact on your overall product costs. So being conscious of that, utilizing different suppliers where possible, and getting equipment that is highly efficient is huge. And there is a ton of misinformation on this side out there in industrial. There's also some new developments. We've been kind of excited about some of the things we have worked on recently to create new utility-based equipment that really reduces overall costs, increases efficiencies. So these are important. And looking at traditional technology and bringing it into the modern age can actually have a lot of help here, not just considering, hey, I'm building a manufacturing facility that needs to heat the beverage. I'm just going to put a steam boiler in because that's what everyone else does. What everyone else does may not be the best thing for you. And that's important to have somebody come in and take these considerations into mind and be like, hey, this might be a better option for you than this other option. And this is a huge one, and we harp on this all the time, but best people for the job. There is nothing that can save you more money than an expensive laborer that is extremely specialized and extremely skilled. They can do the job of 2 or 3 people. This is huge. And we've seen a lot of approaches out there where some people will have the mindset that, hey, I'm just going to get whoever I can to come in here and work this. And they lose time and productivity from losing those employees, having to retrain them, going through product losses, going through quality dips. If you have good people doing good things, they will produce good product, and that will save you money. It's harder to really put a monetary value on that because you ideally won't see the losses, but you won't see the losses. And this also includes time. Time is a huge, huge factor in manufacturing that always has to be considered. That losing time is losing money. That's losing productivity for sure. So let's look at some of the common operational inefficiencies. And this is kind of the things to keep your head wrapped around, right, as you're going through a manufacturing business. These are all the more common impact points. So small batch inefficiencies, everyone has a starting point, and usually you're going to scale from a small system to a bigger system. Not always. Some people dive into much bigger efficient systems, but that takes much more investment, right? So if you're required to, you start small. And that has its own inset inefficiencies. They can be mitigated, but inevitably, the scaling factor is always a kind of cost driver. So keeping that in mind, how to mitigate those is really important. We like to make sure that all the processes are optimized in a small batch system to make sure we're mitigating any sort of those inefficiency points. Yield loss, for sure. So just speaking alone from fermented beverage, we'll have what we call biomass increases, which is we'll generally use yeast or bacteria to produce alcohol or ferment sugars or produce compounds. What happens there is you add in these microfauna, and basically they will expand and replicate. They will consume things, and then they will come back out. And they will settle out of the beverage, and you don't want to let them go to your finished product. So you remove them. That comes with a loss. As much as you're going to pull out that yeast or microfauna, you're basically going to pull out liquid as well. There's just no way of getting around that. So you'll lose 10%, let's say, just in that process. And then if you have the retail component added onto it, or packaging even, there's usually a 5 to 10% loss just in getting it into its packaged product, right? So now we're already at a 20% loss going forward. You can't bank on the cost of your good being what it is as soon as it leaves its main production phase. The losses must be included in that entire process to realize how much margin you're actually getting on a finished product. All of this can be mitigated with good technical expertise and equipment, 100%. So having somebody who knows what to do to mitigate those losses will pay for themselves extremely quickly. And manual processes. Again, labor is expensive. So try to automate as much as you possibly can. Most people think in small scales, it's impossible to automate. That is 100% not true. And the solutions are getting much more creative all the time and evolving and getting cheaper, believe it or not. So a really good move for small batch producers is that they have access to automations they never had before. Inventory management. You're going to have losses in inventory, especially with things that go bad, right? I mean, and most of these products we're talking about have organic ingredients that will go bad over time. So this is important to manage what inventory you have, how it's stored, and mitigating its loss. Energy waste hotspots. I mean, uninsulated piping for utilities, right? Like if you're doing any sort of heating, those pipes need to be insulated. It helps your boiler not run so often, which saves you natural gas and electricity, right? Cooling. For a lot of these beverage production facilities, you don't just have a cold room, you also have specialized tanks that hold beverages that must be cooled with glycol or ammonia-based chillers or air-based evaporation chillers that cool glycol to run around jackets. If you're not insulating pipes going to them or using a material for that piping that has very poor R values, you're going to lose money. And not just money in like one set of the process by not investing more into the specialized equipment, you're going to lose money over years and years, probably the existence of your business until you improve. So keeping that in mind, that maybe you don't have the financials to do the upgrade, but that needs to be a primary driver for your next investment round to ensure you're not losing costs over time or losing that money over time. And maintenance neglect. Almost nobody that we know of in the small scale can afford to have a dedicated maintenance individual around to do preventative maintenance or regular maintenance or even on demand maintenance. So there are plenty of people in the beverage manufacturing space, we're one of them, that can fix just about anything, right, involved with manufacturing. And having somebody of that skill set around is massive because if something goes down equipment wise, you are losing time and losing productivity, which means you're losing money, right? Now, raw materials, right? I mean, this is a huge deal, most especially for, I mean, really for beverages of any kind. The finished product is just the sum of its parts. And those parts are generally organic agricultural products. That is pretty much consistently true for all of these. And one of them that drives everything here is water quality. Water is pretty much a major ingredient in everything that's produced as far as specialty beverages. And I want to point out that water has such a huge driving impact that literally from the beer world, beer styles are built upon the water in which originally that type of beer was produced. So the IPA, which has been one of the most gigantic growing types of beer in the United States, originally came from a very small little city in England called Burton upon Trent. And it was basically popularized there because they had extremely high sulfate levels in their water, calcium sulfate. So it drove an extra bitterness to the product that people preferred. And it wasn't a harsh bitterness, it was a little bit more of a mineral bitterness that kind of cleaned the palate pretty quickly. So literally the IPA was brewed very heavily there because of the water. Now think of Scotch. Everyone in the Scotch world will tell you that one of the main drivers of the quality of Scotch is the water quality. It has a huge impact. Wine, too. Water is a huge proponent of kind of how those things come together and the way the grapes grow and the structure of the terroir and what they're using as far as the plants go to suck up this water and what it does to the actual fruit. It's everywhere. So whenever you try to do placement of a location, always consider the quality of your water. You can adjust 100%. And filtration is a huge deal now. It's advanced extremely far to have a lot of options to adjust your water profile, but you have to invest then to get the water quality you want, right? And on top of just the water coming in, the water going out or the wastewater, the chemicals, the biological components that are going out, all are crucial to understand how they're going to get to treatment or how you're going to get rid of them without adding a ton of cost to it. Storage, and storage generally does not have much of a value add to it besides the ability to have product available or finished product available at the end. So raw materials, ingredients, packaging materials, it's still crucial and it's still important to make sure that you have the storage and you're not necessarily paying someone else to store things for you. This is a big deal whenever you're getting agricultural products, is a lot of them will have extra cold storage that they're okay with storing their product in until you take it, but you're going to get charged for that usage of space. So it's important to have the space that mitigates your costs. And losses or changes. I mean, when we say agricultural product, it is extremely agricultural, where one bad harvest in one area can have huge implications on your costs and your quality of your ingredients coming in. I mean, oranges are a great example of that. And it's not just one bad harvest now, it's years of bad harvests that are happening in the United States, in North America in general, right? This drives so much of that price volatility, but also the quality. A lot of people don't think about what it does to your finished product. Some manufacturers will mitigate that change for you. Some just can't. In our world, hops. Hops are a major component of beer. If we have wildfires in the area, droughts, bad watering times, rain during harvest, this can massively impact the quality of the product that we get to use. Grain as well. Any malt that comes in will have massive changes due to weather patterns, weather changes. And we'll touch on it again, space utilization. Use your space to the utmost, not just cramming everything into one small space, but utilizing it for efficiency, for good storage, proper storage. Use vertical space when possible, right? Do not just think of your facility as a 2D box. There are often massive potentials to lift things up. Comes with a little bit of added infrastructure, but it may actually mitigate your costs. So as we were talking about with raw materials, there is these, for beverages especially, you're usually using ingredients that are very specialized, very distinctive. And these niche ingredients really require really good sourcing, really good partners that grow them, somebody who's very tuned into how these things can be made not only consistently, but of the highest quality. There's always perishability, especially in most of these raw materials. They have a shelf life. They need to be stored a certain way. Uh, Technology is and processes are constantly improving for a lot of this. But if you're considering making a natural healthy beverage, how is that processed? What do they use? Does the organic tag bring value to your product? Does nobody really focus on an organic tag? And if so, understand that you're going to probably have to spend more money on a raw material because it's grown organically and has less advantages, or not necessarily advantages, but different growing practices that may make non-organic cheaper. Understanding that, and then changes in raw materials, especially with agricultural products, are going to happen. You need to be adaptable as that comes in. Supply chain volatility is, I mean, I feel like probably any business owner has been talking about this for years. It is constantly changing. And honestly, once it gets better, it's about to get worse. So you always have to be bracing for the next major thing to happen in the world. History is pretty much full of those. So don't feel like this one's novel. You can get a lot of resources from what has happened before. Quality consistency, especially the impact it has to your consumer. And minimum order quantities. This is a big one for starting out small, for sure. There are tons of suppliers that won't even have a conversation with you because you're not going to order enough of their product. That 100% exists out there. And being able to find those specialty producers that are willing to work with you and grow with you is usually a huge thing to just focus on and find good partners. Equipment procurement. So this is something we have been doing a lot for our clients, which is identifying equipment out there that's available and sourcing and supplying it to them in a lot of circumstances. And it's a very large capital expense. And just to give you a little insight, just from our being transparent, our recent build of our brewery, we had actually set aside around $1.1 million alone for brewing equipment. And that was really not considered to be a very large production facility. We have lots of capacity for our size, but that was basically the market at the time. That was what new equipment was going to cost. So that was kind of our worst case scenario. Upon full build, we were able to cut that in half. So we actually saved 50% of our overall projected costs because we were very creative and utilized our time as well to invest in adjusting used equipment that we could get accessibly. That comes with its own downsides. You need to have space to store it until you're ready for it. You need to have somebody who knows how to ship it, to move it, to put it into place. All of that comes into consideration, right? And that's the things that you may look at, especially if you're buying from an auction a piece of equipment. It seems really cheap, and it's called whatever. It's called a boiler, right? And it looks good from the pictures online. And then you buy it and you figure out, oh, I have to get it out of this other facility in a certain amount of time. So I need a logistics partner to pick it up. Ideally, they crate it for you. You may have to have somebody else to do that to get it ready for shipping. It arrives to your facility. You need to have a place to put it. You need to have somebody to unload it. And then it shows up, and it may be not adaptable to your utilities of your existing building. So what did you save in that long run, right? It may be something where, okay, I can't even use this anymore. Well, there goes that investment, and I still have to buy something new. Having somebody who can mitigate those challenges and issues is a huge deal and needs to be definitely somebody you have on hand to help you through those processes if you don't know how to do that yourself. And that's something that we've met a handful of people out there that are really, really good at this exact process of knowing what to buy, knowing what utilities will adapt to it, what's possible and what's impossible, and mitigating those risks right off the get-go, right? And shipping and installation costs. These are highly, highly specialized uh, industries and actually workers who do this kind of thing, where we've worked with uh, installers and technicians from all over the world. And they all are people who do this for a living constantly and are really good at it. So understand that has its own cost with it, because you're not paying for their time that they're there. They're paying for their 30 plus years of experience of doing this exact thing and saving you money in the long run. It's something you have to weigh. And regulatory compliance and inspections. I mean, because a lot of the beverage industry is carbonated beverage, you have to think about pressure vessels, and pressure vessels come with their own regulations, safety hazards, safety risks, and compliance issues that you need to be functioning within. And basically using that as a resource, using those specifications to ensure you don't buy something that doesn't meet those qualification standards. Now, I said we would get to it. Talent. I cannot stress enough how much talent gives you a competitive edge. And it's beyond just managing labor costs here. It's investing in skill and knowledge. It's investing in giving yourself a competitive advantage from the get-go. Now, I'm not going to say that specialists don't usually carry along with them some sort of personality quirk. That's not 100% true, but I've rarely met specialists who don't have some sort of quirk about them that makes them a little bit different, right? But that being said, fitting into your company culture needs to be something that's considered, but you also have to consider there's not as many specialists out there as there even used to be, right? Like, that's the divide of knowledge, and we see this everywhere we go, for manufacturing is massive. The really knowledgeable people are really knowledgeable. The vast majority of the people in the industry that are the workers don't know much about what they're doing. They're giving standard operating procedures and said, do this, right? But they don't think critically about what they're doing. They don't bring improvement to the table. That's not to say they don't have a place for that. They do. The world needs ditch diggers. That's just a fact. But you need to have someone that can guide, direct, and improve the product throughout that process. So expertise has driven companies to be the most successful they possibly can be. And that's a huge investment that should be undertaken, if not quickly in the process. But also diversity of knowledge, because we talked about the specialty beverage industry is very volatile and it changes. Having somebody who knows a lot about a lot of different things can help you be more adaptable. And you can give them a challenge and they will be on it and get it done and do it extremely well. That gives you a competitive advantage for sure. And really, this is what we're talking about, like a little bit more focusing on this concept of experienced employees, knowledgeable employees. And I will specify here. So I was formally trained before I started working in the industry. I'm probably, if I could go back, would start working in the industry and then get my formal training, because it would have helped me have a little bit more of a competitive advantage. But having both is a huge advantage to somebody who is just experience led only or just formally trained only. And the reason is that you oftentimes, when you're formally trained, don't get a chance to actually function in the working world, to see the challenges that come up and how to overcome them. That is work experience. But people who are work experience may not know why they're doing what they do. They just do it because that's the way they've always done it. Doesn't make you very adaptable, doesn't make you very efficient, right? But also, being innovative and developing new products requires this expertise of what is possible with what you have versus what you need to get to do that thing. And that can save you a ton of money of what you invest in as well, just having that knowledge of what you need. Besides the operational efficiencies, the constant improvement aspect, the quality aspect, those are all huge deals that talent will get you to those points and have you in a better place faster than most other investments. There's only so much automation can do for you. Now, is it something you definitely should add to your process? Absolutely, because menial tasks shouldn't be something you're paying for repeated labor necessarily, where you can get away with it. But it has its limits, right? And problem solving. There is not a world where you are not going to have problems throughout the process of running a facility like this. So, having somebody who can address those problems and fix them quickly is a huge leg up in the success of your business. So, bring this all together. What we're really talking here about is being able to find market opportunities within this realm of specialty beverages, right? And it means you have to align all of these things we talked about, and that will give you the most or highest possible competitive advantage if you can align these things. Now, again, we're talking about the ideal world that all of these things just line up and suddenly you are coming out winning in this market. That is not really how it works. I like to think in the ideal world, but act in the real world, or I think in the ideal world, act in the real world, which is basically imagine what is possible, but do what you can, right? In this case, though, there is still tons of opportunity out there. And I will say it's from the highest levels, the most dominant possible companies in these markets still have some really large inefficiencies that they can't address, right? And then the much smaller, more adaptable businesses at the lower spectrum, they have an advantage, but also tons of disadvantages. There's no world where somebody has everything possible. That's not where we're at. But if you can get the best possible out of these components, you're going to have a successful business on your hands. So really what we're talking about is, especially when you're starting, build that foundation right from the beginning, right? You need to be able to navigate these challenges and understand the impact they have on your business. That's the knowledge you need to have as the leader, right? Getting the people that can solve them is part of being that leader and getting them to work together to establish solutions. You knowing the direction and the goal is huge. They don't need to think about that now. They can think about how they're going to get there, right? And that's a big deal. But you do need to have the top talent. To play into my classical studies, honestly, Octavian would have gotten nowhere without Agrippa. That's just fact. You have to have that person that can go out and get done what you need to get done for you, because you're going to be weighed down with running that business, right? For those of you that are operating, if you are, being adaptable might mean bringing in new talent. Being adaptable and getting into this market nuance or these niches that are growing segments may mean you need to go out and get somebody that can get you there. And that's 100% what you should do. They can help you through all of these other challenges as long as you're willing to give them that responsibility. In a lot of cases, you have to let them loose, let them do their thing. Now, don't go unregulated, obviously, but if they're good at what they do, they will earn you money for sure, make your business much more profitable. And that's pretty much the wrap up. So thanks all for listening to my immense diatribe, and really appreciate your time. I'd love to hear any questions and answer any questions you might have had through that entire presentation.
Yes, thank you so much, Matt. And for you in the audience, if you'd like to pose a question, you can type it in your chat or raise your hand, and we'll try to take you off of mute. So anyway, a couple quick questions that came up. What is the role of insurance in running a microbrewery? Any tips you want to give us as far as selecting the right coverage?
Yeah, it's a big deal in a sense too. So from the insurance aspect, you need to have somebody who is familiar with manufacturing industries, who does a lot of insurance for manufacturing facilities, even if you're a retail as well. And that becomes even more specialized, right? Because you need somebody who understands serving alcoholic beverages, if that's your actual business model, what that implies for insurance as well on the other side. But there's also this component of you need to know what's in your facility to be able to explain to the insurance company or the adjuster who comes out to look, or the evaluator that comes to look at your facility to decide what they're going to charge you for insurance. You need to be really knowledgeable about what's in there. And for example, for us, a steam boiler in the brewing world, a steam boiler comes with a massive insurance cost because it is a pressurized steam vessel that could potentially explode. We mitigated that by changing from an actual pressurized steam vessel to an open to atmosphere heating vessel, right? And that comes with no insurance repercussions. So there's little things you can do in your manufacturing process that, or the equipment you choose, that will help mitigate that. For the retail component, make sure you're getting a knowledgeable insurance provider, somebody who works in that space, because they will be much more accurate than somebody who comes in as an insurance evaluator and just say, I don't know, so I'm going to charge you extra, right? It's really important to have that knowledge in your partner there.
Now, I would imagine you probably give the same counsel if you were asked about selecting an accountant or lawyer,
Yeah.
somebody that has experience in microbreweries.
Yeah, and I'll definitely point out something. We're dealing with it too. Our accountant really is familiar with retail spaces, but when you bring up the nuance of manufacturing, which is basically you invest in cost of goods and you wait 4 to 6 weeks to have a finished product and another 4 to 6 weeks to actually know how much that cost you, that's going to blow a lot of accountants' minds. They're not going to be able to wrap their heads around that whole concept that there's a delay of return on a good. They can't attribute a cost to it. So finding someone who is experienced is pretty crucial in that, or be able to communicate to them what's actually happening and how to better restrict those costs.
Okay. And then two more quick questions, then maybe we'll adjourn. One is any marketing advice for opening? So a lot of costs are going into these facilities, and you need to start generating revenue quickly, but you're not known yet really. So any things that work, opening parties or what have you. And then the second issue is minimum size of footprint, minimum size revenues that you should really strive for to have this enterprise make sense to even embark on.
Yeah, that's two good questions there. So we're in a world now where social media is pretty much your best driver for impact in marketing. Media presence is huge. And I would say two things that I really like to do for any new concept is step one is what we call soft openings, or engaging your local community or friends or industry partners. You should basically have a couple nights in your first retail opening, especially, where you invite not only local city inspectors or local municipality officers, but also emergency response should be invited to some of these things as well. Local police departments, again, like they're not allowed to accept bribes, obviously. But if you invite them to just say, hey, come in, see the space, we're dedicating this night to you. I want you to understand what we are, right? Is a huge advantage to just mitigating any sort of problems down the road. Then engage, once you have sort of your business operations optimized, engage social media influencers. Don't necessarily pursue the ones that require payment or gifts or donations to even show up, but tag the ones in that can actually provide some impact to get you started. And it will drive a lot of traffic your way, because there's a huge new push where everybody looks to venues they want to go to through social media. And the big impactors are Reels or TikTok, honestly, is still a huge driver, where the attention span needs to be addressed. People only want to see 10 to 15 seconds and be like, I want to go there. Like that's the new world we live in a lot of ways. And then, so on the flip side, production size and revenue. What we tend to tell all of our new clients, especially in the retail space, is that make sure your real estate costs are about 10% of your overall sales, so gross sales, right? If you can maintain that level where your gross sales are only cut by 10% in real estate costs, the rest of the operational costs should not be that significant to really bring you down. If you can achieve that, you're probably going to be successful. Now, that being said, I will say that one of the biggest risks and issues in the immense growth, let's say, of craft producers has been, if you start small and you grow extremely fast, you're going to take on debt to expand usually. That debt is a huge drag on your overall income. And it's also a very dangerous liability to carry. So be mindful that maybe your strategy of developing a world conquering brand may need to shift to be a brand that you sell to somebody who may give you a better offering and get you out of that debt liability while making a profit from it. So we targeted for local on-premise retail. If you're going to do a brew pub, be realistic about your production numbers. You're not going to produce any more than 2,500 barrels worth of beer. That requires roughly a 5,000 square foot facility. Okay. If you're doing manufacturing and trying to go to distribution and get way out in your reach, you're going to need 10 to 20,000 square feet. I mean, it's a big shift in the overall need of space, depending on what your actual business model is.
And then the last question, to what extent are there excise taxes on on-site produced alcohol or, at the retail at the bar? Are there any jurisdictions that impose excise taxes?
Oh yeah, yeah. So basically, you'll be paying what we call inventory taxes for the most part, which are excise taxes, and that's any beer that is produced. You have federal and you have state, right? There is very rarely any sort of local tax to this, but they both regulate you and tax you differently. So every state has a different tax to it, depending on alcohol production, especially. And the federal one has been maintained as relatively small. It's been reduced, was that probably about 10 years ago, and it stayed relatively minimal. That is actually on beer you produced with the removal of beer you've lost. So you can actually kind of get a tax credit off of losses as you go along. Being in Pennsylvania, I remember it was the same kind of setup. It was a minimal excise tax for everything that was produced, plus your losses get to give you a credit. In Texas, they don't look at it that way. So they look at it as any beer that reaches the final, what they call tax determined tank, which is the vessel right before someone as a consumer drinks it. That is what you get taxed on. And it basically is any beer you've made up to that point is factored into that. So you pay taxes on what you lose as you get to that tax determined vessel. On top of that, to be mindful, most especially in Texas, is you get double taxed because if you are operating as a bar, which for example we are, you get an extra 6% tax on anything that is sold to the consumer that we as the bar owner have to pay. And then the consumer gets an extra 6% on that beverage as well, whenever they pay. We are working actively with legislation in the state to change that. And it quite possibly could change this session. We'll see. But nobody likes being double taxed, and we're trying to fix it. But keep in mind, alcohol laws are archaic. It's pretty much everywhere. They haven't changed because there's never been a need to. They are changing actively. It's just the progress is slow.
Great, great. Well, Matt, thank you so much for speaking to us and putting all this work into your presentation. Your slides were great. Your analysis was great. Your presentation was very informative. So we really appreciate you educating us on, running a microbrewery and all the things that you spoke about were very helpful to us. So thank you, and we hope you'll come back and educate us next year as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity, David. Thanks everyone for listening, and hope it helps. That's what we shoot to do.
I'm sure it will. Was your contact information on one of the slides?
Ooh, I don't think I did. I think I just put my name on the front.
Maybe you can just tell us your email or.
Yep. Yeah, you can reach us at info@consultsolon.com. So think of it of asking Solon questions. That's our website. We also have www.consultsolon.com. You can reach us through the website as well with a contact and a set time you want to talk. So we're always available, and would love to hear from you guys.
Great. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation.